Unless you've been living under a rock, or living in actual life, you likely will have heard of Trizooka, and how uncounterable or unreactable it is. Yet, all this talk of Trizooka I think has been distracting us from another culprit that's been making this meta perhaps a bit more toxic than it needs to be. This culprit sees use in about 99.9% of all team competitions in pro play, give or take, and has been prominent in the meta even before Zooka got its initial buffs. I won't keep you in suspense, you've likely read the title. I'm on about Tacticooler here, and Cooler is a decent player in making Zooka feel as uncountable as it does right now, and is just overall an incredibly strong special. But to understand why, I want to talk about counterplay. So the conversation surrounding Zooka has been about its counterplay, or its lack thereof. Yet there is a form of counterplay that exists, not just for Zooka, but to all specials that I don't see mentioned at all. The most universal form of counterplay that can be used to counter anything, literally anything, even in real life. That is the counterplay known as death. Seriously, you can counter Trizooka by just killing them. Easier said than done, sure, but should you pull it off, you nullify all pressure from that special on the player using it. Should you splat the Zooka user before they get the chance to use it, there goes half their special charge and they have to build it back up again. It can seriously delay an enemy team's game plan and give an opportunity for you to extend your push, stagger the enemy team, or buy time to mount a counter of your own. But you know that, of course, you're a smart viewer, and that's what I really respect about you. But also, it's one of the first things you're taught in Squid School: don't die. As a result, if a player on a team happens to have a rather important special, they will play in a further back position. They'll avoid the front lines if possible, because that's where they're most likely to die. It's a cowardly playstyle, sure, but it's also one that stops one from dying, so it works. But it's not perfect, because even that can be exploited. By playing further back, it becomes more difficult to affect the front lines. It's harder to stop the enemy from advancing. Should you notice a splash player, for example, is playing further back than you'd expect, they're likely playing for their special, which means you're able to force fights in the front lines and play more aggressively than you otherwise would. They can't risk investing too much into stopping you, since their chances of dying would increase. That is until they get their special and use it, but until then you have that opportunity, and you can seriously punish them for it. A really good example of this is found at the start of basically every game. A tactic abused by essentially every team is that of early specials, taking time out of your initial swim to mid to paint parts of the map to quickly gain your special for an early advantage. This isn't so much an early advantage as much as it's an early trade-off though. One player gives up their early presence in mid in hopes that when they eventually arrive in mid, they'll be stronger than their opponents, given the special advantage, and can win by brute force. The best way to punish this type of opening is the same way you punish players for playing too safely. We try to fight the rest of their team for control over mid while they have a missing player. This is a form of counterplay that isn't very often taken advantage of in the lower levels, or even in the mid levels in my honest opinion, and that's for a few reasons. The main one as I see it is that both teams for the most part have very similar game plans. As I said before, basically every team plays for early special, like every game they play. They're both trying to do the same things, and are essentially just trying to do it better than the other team, and so are reluctant to take opportunities to play more aggressively. That, and honestly, I don't think some players even realise it's an option. Regardless, this form of counterplay still exists, and it exists for all strategies that revolve around specials, and this does include Trizooka. While this form of counterplay can be mitigated with things like quick respawn and special saver, that is generally not a viable option. Special saver stacks decently well in small amounts, and can be good in high amounts, but it's hard to justify running in a gear build, especially if you want to stack it with quick respawn, which is an amazing ability when ran in high quantities, but is a massive gear investment and just isn't good at all when ran in small quantities. In an entire gear set, you only have 57 AP to work with, and when there's a lot of really useful abilities running around, it can be hard to justify giving all of that to quick respawn and special saver just so you can play more aggressively when you don't have your specials up. And this is especially true considering that a lot of these different specials have certain gear requirements of their own. Inkjet, for example, is very often ran with 1.1 special power, and is sometimes ran with drop roller as well. Plus, these specials like to be ran with special charge to help with their uptime. And you can see where I'm going with this, because Tacticooler gives full QR and full special saver just for having the buff. And on top of that, it's entirely possible to have 100% uptime with only one cooler user on your team, thanks to its 19-second duration when it has 2 subs of special power. Simply having the Tacticooler buff nullifies everything that I've just said about counterplay. Death won't make you lose your special, and you respawn near instantly. Death, while still taking you out of the game for a bit, is nowhere near as game losing as before. By not losing special charge when you die, you just feel a whole lot safer playing in the front lines, and it won't affect your special timings and your ability to execute your game plan. And this is, in my opinion, a big reason why Zooka feels so uncounterable right now. Like, these comps that run Tacticooler are designed to make interacting with the Zooka user themselves not the solution to the Zooka. You can't just splat them and take them out of the game. In a sense, Tacticooler becomes a strong support special for other strong specials in the meta by taking all the innate counterplay that exists to these strategies and removing them, condensing them into itself. itself. Like, sure, the Cooler user does get the buff, but having 100% uptime on Cooler isn't easy unless you're constantly painting and trying to build your special. You get to play aggressive when your buff is up, but the moment your special gauge is depleted, you gotta put all your effort into getting another drink before the effects of the last one run out. This severely limits the Cooler's options since they can't afford to die. I mean, they can afford to die once, but even then, time spent away from the front lines is time spent away from paintable ground, and so dying, even with your buff, is still bad. And should the Tacticooler user on their team die twice in a row, the game is basically over for that team. If they go too long without being juiced up, all the weaknesses from the start of the video start cropping up again, and another weakness of Tacticooler starts to show its face. Because you see, Tacticooler is unique among specials, since it is the only special that has no hitbox. It doesn't paint, it doesn't protect your team, and no, I am not counting the Cooler itself as being an object that can protect you, it's just there. Using Cooler does next to nothing to the state of the game. With any other special, if you want to push, you can pop your Bio Bomb to clear out a part of the map, you can use your Killer Whale to displace a few people, you can pop Trizooka, get a quad cap zone and solve world hunger, but if you pop Cooler, there is no immediate impact on the game. It increases your team's fighting ability, sure, but doesn't actually help you push. It has zero playmaking potential. This weakness becomes very apparent when you go a long time without your Cooler buff. Should the enemy team have no Cooler or just have better uptime on theirs, they have so much more of an ability to push for space that it's a whole lot easier for them to snowball a game out of control. In the current meta, this is what makes the games feel so swingy. The team that loses is more often than not the team that had the longest stretch without their Cooler buff, the team that was unlucky enough for their Cooler user to die twice in a row. So Cooler is an issue right now, and that's unfortunate since I actually really like it in concept. It's supposed to increase the fighting ability of your team for an extended period of time, and then when they die, they jump back in immediately to keep up the pressure. It's supposed to be the Zerg Rush special, forcing your team to deal with wave after wave of players dying and jumping in and dying and jumping in and then dying and then jumping in again. It's the Blitzkrieg of Splatoon, perfectly exemplified by the Dapple Doolies kit. For some reason, its weakness of lacking explosive pushing power makes sense, since you're trading the immediate and powerful threat of Trizooka, for example, for the weaker but more consistent pressure of your main weapons and subs. And it's for this reason that I'm just completely baffled by the dev's choice to give this thing max special saver. By letting this special help other specials with their consistency, I feel like it completely betrays its original design philosophy. It's able to patch up its weakness through the use of other specials on its team in an unhealthy way. That, and it's the only special in the game that can be used to support other specials. I genuinely think this special will be a whole lot healthier for the game if they just removed the saver aspect of it entirely. But what I find most interesting about Tacticooler is that in the current state of Splatoon, its main weakness is basically meaningless. Sure, your team lacks pushing power by using it, but what would you swap out for it instead? Barring Tacticooler, there are only 3 other specials worth using in this meta: Crab, Inkjet, and the infamous Trizooka. Power-wise, these 3 eclipse everything else, and it isn't even close. Sure, you could swap out Tacticooler, but what are you going to use? Wavebreaker? Sure, okay, go and get a quad with Wavebreaker, I guess. If the first 3 weapons in your comp already have some combination of the 3 meta specials, your 4th could be something like Killer Whale or Inkvac, but why, when you could get better results by investing into the other 3 specials with Cooler? All other specials in the game are so underpowered right now that they aren't worth using, even if they should be stronger in theory. There is no competition. If your team ever uses a comp that has one of these weaker specials, it's likely that your team has some idiot who one-tricked something dumb like Inkbrush, which has like 0 kits with good specials. But I wouldn't know anything about that. Or your comp has Stamper, which is such a broken main and sub combo that it doesn't need good specials to have a good kit. I mean, I normally like to end these by proposing some kind of solution to this issue, but the only solution I can think of is what I've already said before. Just remove the special saver aspect of this special. Like, it doesn't need to be there. Like, that's it. And with that said, thank you for getting this far. Make sure to do the normal YouTubey things, and pasta la vista.